So now it's my esteemed honor to, we don't have, it's not called the Supreme Court in Maryland, it's called the
Court of Appeals.
Court of Appeals, but it's the equivalent to the Supreme Court, and of course Judge Bell is the chief judge in all of Maryland. But I'd like to go way back in history. You grew up in Baltimore.
I did.
And it was a different form. Well, I just finished reading the book by Claude Brown, Man-Child of the Promised Land, and talking about going from Harlem and how segregated it was and not seeing white people. Baltimore, for those of you who don't know, there's only one city with a population of 500,000 or more that has more segregated housing patterns than Baltimore, and that's St. Louis. And so you grew up in a very segregated Baltimore. It's still segregated, but it's a different kind of segregated Baltimore than it is now. From what you call this, let's see. Nice to share a little bit like what was it like to grow up in that Baltimore, and we'll talk a little bit the fact that one of his good friends was Reginald Lewis, actually, and we'll maybe get to one of those stories too.
Well, Baltimore is totally different than it is today, obviously. I grew up in East Baltimore. I'm from North Carolina, actually. I was born in North Carolina. My mother moved here with her 3 children.
Can you hear the captain?
When I was a year and a half. And we lived in, actually first started right in, I guess it would be right around Pauline Street and Astor. And then moved up to 909 Gay Street. I remember that number, right down the street from the intersection of Caroline and Gay Street. And from there moved over on Broadway, 1400 block. There was a railroad track that ran straight right next to the house. And then 2000 block of Hoffman Street. In those days, there really was complete segregation. We shopped at Gay Street. If you lived in West Baltimore, you'd shop at the market over there, Pennsylvania Avenue. In East Baltimore was Gay Street and then Monument Street. There were movie theaters. They were black movie theaters. There was the Dunbar, the Eden, the Broadway, and there was the middle. Those were movies to which we went. If you ventured below Baltimore Street, you went to white people. Generally speaking, if you stayed above that, you would not. If you wanted to go to a department store, and we rarely did, Gregor Gutman's and Peck, Stewart's, Hutzler's, all those stores were around. But we never went down there very much, because if you went down there, you would have a different experience than you have on Gay Street. You could not try on clothes. You couldn't try on a hat, couldn't try on suits, you couldn't try on shoes. You had to go socks and take a shot of getting it, taking it home once you bought it. Couldn't go to the restaurants. Couldn't go and sit at the lunch counters and have a hot dog. And of course, the schools were segregated. One interesting part of my schooling, however, was that we had one white teacher, Mr. Herman Banger, taught history. And he was at Dunbar because he wanted to be there, not because he was required to be there. In fact, that was the exception. There were no black students, no white students at our school. And that's true even after 1954. Now, you will recall that in 1954, the Brown decision was issued. And immediately thereafter, the Maryland State Department of Education and the Baltimore City Department of Education declared that they would follow the ruling, and that the schools were thereafter desegregated. What happened really was that the schools remained pretty much the way they were. There were selected people chosen to go to white schools. And that pattern lasted for years and years and years. I remember being asked to go to City, and I chose not to go. I decided I would stay where I was, believing at that time that I had a much better chance of getting into the college I wanted to get into if I stayed at Dunbar as opposed to going someplace else. A number of other people chose different routes, and so the desegregation that occurred was rather slight. But in terms of the relationship day to day among the neighbors, it was different than it is today as well, because generally you knew virtually everybody in the neighborhood, played with all people of your age. They were, to the extent that they were lawyers, you had all of the professionals in that same neighborhood. I remember going to school and teacher who taught me, they were right across the street. The ministers were there, your dentists, your doctors, all of those were right in the same neighborhood. And there was a real sense of community, in the sense that if anybody had a success, it was pretty much known throughout the community, and it was pretty much applauded by everybody in the community. Basically, I suspect it's because they realized that there was a success today in that family, then perhaps we'll have another one tomorrow in my family. It was really a community. There was a spirit of community there. There was also no concern on the part of a neighbor in pulling you up if you did something wrong and taking care of it right there, and then telling your parents about it. And of course, you got a second come up with all of that. So I mean, it really was a totally different situation. We were not really aware of that larger world. We rarely interacted with it or the people in it. And we rarely understood, I suspect, that we were underprivileged, that we were discriminated against, until you happened to go into the environment where it became obvious to the south every summer. And in North Carolina, my parents, brothers, and sisters were sharecroppers. So I'd go down and spend the summer with them. And of course, we would work on the farm with them. And every Saturday, you'd go down to Cass. And there you found a whole different ballgame, because when you went downtown, you go to the Friendly Grill, which was the place where you got your barbecue and whatever you want to eat. You go to the back to get served, and everyone else would go in front. You saw the signs that said white collar all over the place. You went to the movies. It was one movie. You went to the movie theater, and you went upstairs and sat in the balcony because the white people sat on the first row. In retrospect, quite frankly, I prefer being in the balcony. Because nobody could throw anything down on me. I could throw something down. But nobody really thought about it in that sense. And then there were the signs that you saw all the time of the deference that was paid to every Mr. The owner of the farm was Mr. So-and-so. But my uncle was Sidney or Bill, whatever his name was, and his wife, our first name, and of course you have to call all the white people by the last name with a title in front of it. And so you saw those examples. Also going down, you had to, we take the trailway buses. We didn't ride the train, we'd ride the buses. You could take the Greyhound bus from Baltimore to Washington, but there you had to change the trailway, because trailway would go south. And of course, it was a segregated seating on the buses. Everybody knows about that. If you went south in a car, there were no opportunities to stay at the major hotel. You had to map out in advance where you were going to stop. If you find some bread and breakfast that would cater to you. Otherwise, you have to sleep in the car or just drive straight through. My family decided to start early in the morning, 3 o'clock, let's say, and drive until you got there. Took your sandwiches and whatnot with you. Of course, you couldn't stop at a restaurant and have a meal. If you did stop, you'd have to go to the back, be served, then bring it back to the car, or sit outside behind the establishment. That's basically the way it went.
So, at a certain point in your life, though, you became really aware of the injustices of segregation, and it was kind of a peculiar irony that your first round with the Court of Appeals wasn't as a judge, but I guess the defendant. Maybe you could share that story.
Yeah, well, I was in high school, Of course, you know, you learn things as you are being educated. Of course, I knew about the segregation from, we had Black History, by the way. It was Black History Month. No, Black History Week in those days. It's now Black History Month. So you learn a lot of things about what was going on. And so I was aware of the greater world I was there and how unjust it was. But I was elected student government president at Dunbar. Reginald Lewis, who John mentioned, was his classmate. He didn't mention his classmate. He was a classmate of mine. Reginald F. Lewis of the Beatrice fame, was a classmate who ran with me on the same ticket. I was president of student government. He was vice president. We campaigned together, and it was really a grand campaign. Showed a good deal of political astuteness. We won, and shortly thereafter, remember the sit-in demonstrations that triggered the civil rights movement began in Greensboro, North Carolina A&T. That was probably around April. And it was way up coast to Baltimore. By the way, Baltimore had a long history of sit-ins and picketing and trying to desegregate establishments here. In fact, it was an ongoing situation up north, trying to desegregate that area where Morgan was located for years and years and years, perhaps 10 years before the civil rights movement began in the South. But in any event, the Morgan students came to and spoke with me and wanted to recruit high school students to be engaged in a sit-in and also a picketing in Baltimore, on Baltimore Street on the land station. My job was to try to recruit the students. They would supply the buses. Now the deal was that it was put to me that it was an unjust situation. We needed to have people on the front line doing something to change it. Not a hard set for them. It was an easy set. It was the right thing to do. So I set about trying to do that. We got a number of students together, enough to fill a bus. We took off on the last day of school and went down on Baltimore Street. We started about a block below, I guess it would have been in the block where Calvert and Guilford Avenue, that block. There were some establishments there, and we picked those establishments out. And it was there that I really saw, for the first time, I think, what I would characterize as pure hatred. We had the picketing going on, and there was a counter-picketing, of course, counter-demonstration. The faces, the words, the threatening gestures, and whatnot, was absolutely frightening. And of course, we had already been advised that you could not respond in any way at all, because otherwise you would undermine the process. So you have to take all of the taunts, all of the epithets. You had to live with all of the hatred that you saw without any response at all. After about an hour of that, we broke off to about 12 or 13 of us and went up to the next block, Charles and Walnut, a restaurant there called Cookies. I must tell you parenthetically that those must have been the dumbest people in the world. Every establishment on that block, on those two blocks, had closed. They knew we were there. We'd been there about an hour. They closed. Everybody but us. They were open. And so we went in. There were 12, 13 of us in the place. We all sat at different tables and waited to be served. And we were refused service. And eventually the police came, read the trespass statute to us, and we were arrested. Now, when I say arrested, we weren't physically arrested that day. We had the leader of the group was a Morgan student, whose name was quarrels, he and his wife. And he negotiated a deal whereby we could go home, that this is a Friday, we could go home that weekend and report to the jail on Monday. And that's what we did with the fingerprint process. Charged, and charged with trespass and tried in the circuit court. In those days, it was called the Supreme Bench of Baltimore. We were tried in the circuit court on the second floor. If you go in on, those of you who are lawyers, if you go in on the St. Paul Street side and make that first left, the first courtroom on that left side is the courtroom where it was tried. It was tried in front of Judge Burns, John Carroll Burns. After hearing the testimony and having the arguments made, he found us guilty, fined each of us $10 in costs, but suspended. Offered probation without a verdict, but nobody took that because the purpose was not to get a lenient disposition. It was to present a case that could be appealed. Of course, it was appealed from the Court of Appeals. There was no intermediate appellate court in those days. It went directly to the Court of Appeals. And the Court of Appeals affirmed the convictions. Whereupon petition for certiorari was taken to the Supreme Court of the United States. That petition was granted and the case was heard. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court could not resolve it on the merits for two reasons. One, they didn't have enough votes for reversal or affirmation. Second was, and this is probably the reason they didn't have the number of votes. After we were arrested, convicted, and our sentences, our convictions were affirmed, state legislature and the City Council of Baltimore passed public accommodations legislation. And so, at the time the case was on at the Supreme Court, if we had gone downtown and did exactly what we'd done, there would not have been a crime. And so the Supreme Court, rather than writing the opinion, sent the case back to the Court of Appeals for review in light of the new legislation to see what the court would do with the case. And of course, the court affirmed the conviction a second time. And a motion for reconsideration was made, and several months later, the court reversed itself. So I'm no longer convicted of misdemeanor. But that was my first experience with the court system. Interesting personalities. And I guess Jan's going to want me to tell you this. Interesting personalities in this case. We had, at the trial level, the attorneys representing us were Juanita Jackson Mitchell and Robert Watts. Up here, the major movers. For the state, there was a fellow by the name of James Murphy. And then at the Court of Appeals, the state was represented by Lawrence F. Radowski. We were represented by Tucker Deering, Juanita Jackson Mitchell, James Neighbor, who was the president of Howard University. And for a brief time, Thurgood Marshall, Jack Greenberg, and Constance Baker. Jack Greenberg carried on along with Constance Baker Motley at the Supreme Court. When the case came back to the Court of Appeals, another notable person took over for the state. Robert Charles Murphy became the state's representative. Let me tell you who some of these people are. James Murphy, the judge of the Supreme Bench of Baltimore, prior to 1980. In 1980, when I became a judge of the Supreme Bench of Baltimore, he was a judge on the court, as was Robert Watts. I became I became a judge on the Court of Appeals in 1991. At that time, both Lawrence F. Radowski and Robert Charles Murphy were on the Court of Appeals. In fact, I replaced Judge Murphy as the Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals. So it kind of had its rather, what do you call it? You said it's irony.
I would call it an irony for sure. So, Truman Dabowski has this book out called Beating the Odds, subtitled High Achieving African American Males in Education. And the point is that he finds that the most important variable for high achieving is that there's some mentor or some individual that served a role and kept them on mark and kept them from straying into drugs, straying into the gangs, whatever. And I know your mother had a powerful impact, and you had two other mentors. I'm just wondering if you'd be able to talk about mentors in your life, both as a child and then later on as an adult. I think you had a serendipitous experience with Paul Sarbanes along the way also.
But you know, another thing, there's got to be more than one. I mean, my thought is one is always constantly coming into contact with people who have influences on them, positive influences on them. And it's those interactions that continue to keep you focused and moving ahead. In the old days when we had the segregated community, most of that started with, it had to start at home. I mean, my mother was less than a third grade education, but also knew that in order to survive, it's something quote unquote like yourself, you had to have an education. So she pushed and pushed and pushed. So she was the person who was most instrumental in starting both myself and my brothers along the path. Just pushing and setting not an example from her own experience, but making sure that we understood that we needed to rise above where she got to, and we had to do that through education. So she was the first one. Second, I guess you ran into the supportive assistance of your teachers. They were very committed to making sure that you had the opportunity, whatever opportunities were available. And they pushed, and they pushed, and they pushed as best they could. Much of what they did was to make you aware that you had something to be proud of insofar as your heritage was concerned. You know, they used this Black History Week thing to its fullest to make the point about those folks who rose above challenges and who became very famous. They kept drumming that in. And they kept telling us about how necessary it was for you to be a quote-unquote credit to your race. I mean, that was the push. And then we ran into people along the way who were particularly impressive. I remember 7th grade, you had Charlie's son. Charlie's son was in here. Charlie Tilden was my 7th grade teacher. And I remember being terribly impressed by him and how he presented himself. And some of the things he said to us in class which had nothing to do with health. It had to do with life. And as I've gone through life, I've run into folk who have reinforced all of those values. Harry Cole, John Hargrove, Solomon Baylor, Sarbanes, I ran into in 1960, I want to say 66, but it might have been. When did he become I ran into him when he was running for the House delegates.
66.
That's what I thought it was, 66. And I was home on that particular day for something, I don't know. And he knocked on the door. He and his wife were campaigning for the House delegates. I was in his district. And so I came to the door, and here's this guy asking for me to vote for him. And so I had a book in my hand, and somehow or another we got into a discussion about the school. And he learned I was at Morgan. He learned that I wanted to become a lawyer. And after about 2 hours of sitting around talking, he had convinced me that I had already planned to apply to Harvard, but he had convinced me that the only place to go to school for law school was, I was in my last year at Morgan at the time, the only place to go to law school was Boston. So as a result of his discussion, I ended up applying to 3 law schools: Harvard, Boston College, and Boston University. All because of him. And then I got into Harvard, and we've remained friends over the years. But that was a significant interaction that I had, and it's helped me over the years. It's continued to be. He's continued to be a mentor for me. Let's have a number of other people that I've come into contact with, and I hope I will continue to come.
2 hours per door, that wasn't a whole lot of votes. I hope you got it.
The point is, here was a guy that impressed me because he thought it was so important that he make the contact. And once he made the contact, he was interested enough in you to engage you on things that you were interested in, putting to the side for the moment what he was interested in. And in so doing, he buttressed his ability to get a lot of those votes, I guess. I mean, they saw the interest in it. And I think over the years, we've been justified in how it's placed in him, because he's been a really good delegate and senator. I guess congressman before that.
So just one last question, then we'll open up to the groups. This is just a short story. You talked about running for student council with Reginald Lewis as your vice president. You were the president, but he was the one who would offer me hundreds of millions of dollars. And, could you see that early? What was his entrepreneurial spirit like?
Oh, he was always there. Here's the thing about Reggie, because Reggie always did have that drive to become famous and also to make a lot of money. He sold afros. I did that. He was always involved in adoption. He taught me and several other our friends into pulling the floats. We used to have these big parades downtown after Thanksgiving. You remember, he talked us into pulling the float on that Thanksgiving Day parade. You know, no Thanksgiving Day dinner, you go down and pull the float. All because of Reggie. He talked me into hawking sodas at the Memorial Stadium. Turns out I went up there and I couldn't hawk the sodas. I had to stay inside the cups. Unfortunately, he didn't tell me how I was supposed to check in so that I'd get paid at the end of the day. And of course, he never did share his money.